Most of you who have been in this room before know that Disney sort of runs their projects in different ways, but always at the end of the day. And so instead of the next 3 presentations being one a break, one a break, one a break, we're going to run them one right after another. And Joe Rohde is going to be our narrator and guide. Many of you in this room know that Roberta and I are always wondering what WDI's wizard extraordinaire, Joe Rohde, is up to. Where has he been? Not looking for snow leopards. Does he ever sleep? Probably not. The next several Disney attractions all bear Joe's inimitable imprint, so Joe has offered to moderate these sessions with his teams. He will be moderating 3 different winning attractions. The first one will be the attraction reimagining for Guardians of the Galaxy mission Breakout. The second one will be Pandora, the world of Avatar, which one is winning the AOA for theme park development. And the third is going to be Avatar, Flight of Passage at the Animal Kingdom. He's going to take a break for questions at the end of each one of the 3 sections. So please welcome WDI's Portfolio Creative Executive, the fabulous Joe Rohde.
Thank you. I am going to try to blast through this very quickly, so we do have times for questions. This is Claire Weiss and John Mauro, who are going to do most of the talking because they did most of the work on Guardians of the Galaxy, which is our first subject area. Let me grab my clicker.
There you go.
Oh, you have it. Oh, you're so good.
That's our job.
And we will try to blow through this so that we have time for questions and discussions as quickly as we can. So this was a really rather unique project, an assignment to take an attraction that people were perfectly happy with and to turn it into another attraction that they had to be more happy with. It is a total transformation of the structure into something perceived to be entirely new. It's really rather challenging to make this happen. Oops, let's just go back one. Well, no, we'll stay here. So, we had sound with this, I thought, did we not?
Yep.
There it comes.
Disneyland? You're welcome.
I'll just touch on this now. A significant portion of the people who worked on this were at the same time working on Avatar, getting that done as well. It was not something you want to wake up in the morning and hear, oh my gosh, let's try this, while we're trying to do that. We need to transform the attraction entirely, make it into something completely different than what it was before. We need to do that by creating an entire new story. And by the way, this is a story that has to communicate to everybody, not just people that are aficionados of the intellectual property. In order to do that kind of thing, you have to go past the plot, past the characters, to the internal character of the idea itself. What's the internal theme? This project was really all built around its idea set. In order to take something that already existed, you can't change it, you can't take it down and rebuild it. You have to start from that. You can't jackhammer this property into that building. You really have to go to the deeper idea that animates the Guardians films. And that is several ideas that are in there. One of them is this notion, those films are very subversive. They are subversive films. They undercut the superhero idea. They undercut ideas about power. They're irreverent. They have a kind of joyful chaos to them. And these are the themes that we were going to try to evoke through this ride. Rather than going straight to the plot of the Guardians movie, to go past that to the very feeling of Guardians itself. Subversion of power, this weird irreverence about everything, even the very premise that this thing is going to be where it's going to be, and this joyful abandon and release, thus the whole idea of Breakout. We also had like no time to do this. It was a very, very, very fast project to get done. And this is a project that had a certain amount of value to the Disney company if it opened on a certain day. And if it did not open on that day, it was like cracked eggshells. So we really had to hit this mark and yet create this big transformation. And lastly, we had a ride system that only does one thing, and we can't change it. It goes up and down. So we had the challenge of trying to figure out how to take something that only does one thing, it goes up, then it goes down, and go up and down in such a way that it feels completely different than it did before when it was just going up and down. And lastly, we knew the entire time that if we choose to do this, we have no choice but to do it in such a way that it comes across as very rich, very rewarding, very surprising, and keep sort of raising bars over the expectation of the base, because it's not like we're starting from zero. We have to put something in that is clearly seen as coming in as being different and being an increment of improvement. Now, in all honesty, I don't do much of this work. I tend to watch it. It is people like this, like Claire and John, who do most of the work, and I'm going to yield the floor to them to do most of the explanation of how that went down.
Excellent.
Claire.
Thank you, Joe. So to establish a framework was huge for us. To do such an aggressive project in such an aggressive timeline, we had to have a very rigid structure. This is where it gets really fun, where we talk about rigid structure. And like any project where we start very, very lofty. We have all of these fantastic ideas about where this could go, and then we quickly drill down into the reality. And the reality of this project is we had, like Joe said, an existing building, an existing ride system, and also existing ride timing to work within. So what we did was we need to quickly take stock, like what do we have? What do we have that we can even affect change against? And then that allows us to weed out the 80% of the things we can't change. We are, like Joe said, we're not going to be building a new building. We're not affecting egress paths. We're not affecting the structure. So it was quantifying what we had to work with. And then also, when you do things like that, what it'll do is it'll allow you to make design decisions very early on. So through sort of this process of understanding what we had to work with, we were unknowingly actually making decisions about what our end product would be. So we've sort of designed this framework to work within, and part of our philosophy was that this was an additive project. So additive in terms of the built environment, that we knew we didn't have time to take down and rebuild. Things we had to do had to be additive, so we had to look at it through that lens of what we can add. This is a photo of the prior attraction. We did some very early concept work of what it would look like with things added to it. This is a very simple philosophy, and that was actually a very early concept piece that was not much different from what we delivered. The next thing we had was, we knew we had this idea of power and this subversion of power. And how do we express this architecturally? So we started with this very, very lofty piece of concept art that really had to do a lot of things. It had to tell you the story that you were about to go on. It had to let you know that this was high energy, and it also, most importantly, had to tip the scale. This had to be an entirely new building, and you had to know that from the onset. So it was this very fine balance of almost a compositional exercise of what stuff is enough stuff in an additive way that it turns into a new experience. As a side note, we were very inspired by the cinematic universe. This was not a recreation of a building or place that exists. This is a new story, like Joe mentioned. We are also very inspired by the color palettes of the films. And if you note, this is an aside, but there are very few things in this attraction and in the film that are true gray or black. Everything is actually a version of a color. So color was actually hugely important, both to be true to the cinematic universe as well as sort of telling this, starting this tone of this experience that we were creating for the guest. So once we had a piece of artwork we were satisfied with, we were happy with, it sort of answered the prompt, we quickly moved into 3D modeling. We did several very, very quick 3D modeling exercises, and that was very quantitative. That allowed us to know how much stuff do we need to build and make to make this entirely new. And then our third step was this output of a physical model, which is really this embodiment of both the aspirational look as well as the true quantitative nature of what we were doing. And this model was fantastic. It was a creative tool, an architectural tool. It was also a living document for the themed paint group. And one of the things we employed very early on is we don't change for the sake of change. I think in the design industry, there's a misconception that there's only one right answer to a problem. And we adopted the philosophy early on that there are many, many solutions to this core prompt, this core mood and tone we were creating. So when we were evaluating designs, if it wasn't obviously wrong, then it had to have been some version of right. So this is a very early rendering of Tavon's office, done very early in the project. We very quickly did a 3D mock-up, and once we validated that that was solving the core problem, we didn't change it when we came to execution. This is an install photo. So this is just an example of sort of this type of thinking. And the benefit of this is another example of scene 3 where Rocket, the raccoon, greets us for the first time. This allows us, this very, very rapid decision-making allows us, like any project at the end, there are always things that have to be changed, always things that don't fit, don't look good. And because we made so many quick decisions and forced them through at the beginning, we had the resources and the time at the end to be able to fix and tie things in because we hadn't spent all of our time in the design phase.
I'm just going to interject really quick on that because that's a core thing. This idea that if it's not wrong, it is one of the right decisions is key to the speed of decision-making itself, because it means you with confidence can say, something in there is going to work, make it work. Don't go back. The next time it happens, you narrow that category. So there's a relationship between the speed and the philosophy that if it is not wrong, it must be right. We will find the way to make it right. That leaves all this interpretive room open. It frees you from having to do too many documents because you're really putting the burden on the people on hand who are going to make it right at each stage down. That's all I wanted to
No, that's great. And this is the notion of additive decision making as well. We don't go back on any of the decisions we've made. We've built upon them so that you're sort of aggregating all of these decisions so that you have a logic stream that is so obvious to everyone on the team that they don't have to come to you to ask what color the door handle should be or if the rivet should be tiny or big, because it's so obvious what the answer is. And it helps democratize the decision making, but it also empowers the entire team to get the project done the correct way. And that's the only way to do a project of this speed. So speaking of our good friend Rocket, Rocket was so huge for us in this attraction. He is really the symbol of what this attraction stands for. He's irreverent, he's funny, he's unpredictable, and he is this embodiment of this tone we want our guests to walk away with. So we were very, very intent on having him in our attraction. And I think the thing that's fun about him is he sort of subverts your expectation. We have fabulous fans and guests that are very, very familiar with the prior attraction. They walk into that scene, they know they're going to see a monitor, there's going to be some sort of content delivery, and we intentionally added that back so that the guests would assume they were going to have a similar experience. And then we immediately shattered it. Rocket falls out of the vent, he crashes into your scene, and what he's really done is he's reset your expectation. So now you have a different lens through which you experience this attraction, and it lets you know that really anything is possible. We want to carry this tone through to the ride. The prior attraction was really built on this very slow build to one boo moment. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to start you with the boo. And the benefit of that, again, we didn't change our ride timing. We had the same amount of time in the private attraction that we have in Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. And the attraction feels quite a bit longer. And what we've done by starting you very, very quickly, we've started you on this boo. You're on this high-speed, rockin', high-energy, sort of chaotic, frenetic adventure. And we bought ourselves time in that ride cycle to create a new tone. We've allowed you to experience the sensation of floating, which is something that we didn't have in the prior attraction. And this combination of this visceral floating sensation paired with this crazy rock and roll soundtrack creates this entirely new tone, this chaotic joy that
I'm
we
going to
didn't
just
have.
interject one more time on this, because this again is sort of key to,
Anytime.
no, it's just key to this thing. It's the idea that this is the only thing you can do with this thing that goes up and down that you didn't do before, is switch the gravity from really, really relying on the downward force to create terror, instead relying on the upward force to create exhilaration and loft. It's almost like taking the dial and turning it upside down. That's all you get. The other thing is, all your exposition has to be done by the time you hit that trigger and pull. There is no exposition once the ride begins. So the load of establishing this is a prison break, this is an inside job, you guys are the key, you're the people with the pass, that's got to be handled so that once we pull that trigger, it is nothing but floating, screaming, and laughing and slapstick.
Yep, exactly. So we'll move on to the media component.
To the media.
Here.
It's always hard to follow Joe, in case you guys don't know that. And by the way, the countdown clock that's here feels sort of like what this attraction timeline was like. We only have 13 minutes. The media, we had an equally challenging problem with the media. We had lofty goals that Guardians of the Galaxy was such a popular movie and film when it came out. We were going to launch the second film within weeks of the attraction. So it was really important to us to work really closely with the studios to make sure we were representing this new attraction in a way that lived up to all the great things we love about the characters and what we see in the film. And we had to do that in such a tight time frame, and we wanted to leverage everything that the studios could bring to this. Obviously, the talent from the film, James Gunn, the director and writer, we wanted him to really be a big part of our story, and to leverage taking advantage of the film shoot that was going on in Atlanta. So all those are really important, which meant we needed to lock a script, we needed to lock everything, dialogue, the scenes, everything that was going to happen, which was really hard to do because everything was happening all at the same time. So we had to come up with a number of different types of scenes and vignettes and different dialogue that we could kind of put everything in the can and hope that everything would work out by the time we got to the end. And this is just a little bit to remind everybody of what's in the ride today. A lot of really great scenes, and knowing how quickly people were in there, you had to make sure we grabbed their attention very quickly. What you see on these screens, having the dimensionality, the depth, and what we call moving eye point, that from the perspective of the guest in the ride, that you can see the ceiling, see the floor. All those elements are really important for us to grab. So we had to make sure that we filmed it that way. So as we went to the film shoot, it was really about filming with an array of cameras, making sure we had the actors do a number of takes, but again, making sure that we accounted for every possible angle. We didn't know yet whether the ride would enter that scene going up or coming down, so we had to sort of take that all into account, designing for the unknown, as we say here. And this is just a little bit of a diagram that shows that, to make sure that we could get the different angles and would account for this moving eye point that would allow us to get that depth, which really gives it that sense of believability that we were really, really interested in shooting for. And then working with the studios, with the same visual effects houses that support the Guardians films, we could take advantage of a lot of the things they're already doing for the films. And this is just showing, again, the complexity of the shots to make sure that we could layer that depth. And by how you see those objects or people, whether it's in the foreground or background, and how you move past it allows you to get that sense of a 3D effect almost. The songs, this was equally as important for everybody who loves the Guardians of the Galaxy films. The music plays such a big part of that. And the obvious thing to do was, we'll just take those same song choices from the film and we can just throw them right in here. And what we quickly realized is that it's not just about what you hear, it's about what you hear, what you see, and what you feel, and how that all works together. That visceral feeling of sort of riding the song was really, really critical. And we didn't realize that until we started riding. Of course, you can't test that out on a ride that's still in operation. So we had to do that in the middle of the night, get on there, put headsets on, listen to the song. So does that feel right? Does it sort of have a crescendo as we're going up, or what does it feel like going down? So that was a big part of the song selection.
Interject. This is another one of these weird things. Like, you're on a ride, your adrenaline ramps up. When your adrenaline ramps up, it does that to make your nerve synapses go more quickly. So the very song that you thought would have a beat that you thought was going to be fast enough, once your adrenaline is running, feels like, oh my God, I'm going to fall asleep with this thing. So it's a very small category of songs that actually work because they have to have a very specific beat that keeps up with the nervous energy of the ride. That's just it.
Yeah, and we wanted to make sure we sort of kept in a time frame that these songs had to fit into that sort of late 60s to sort of through the early 80s. We wanted different types of songs so that different types of visuals, different movement would make these sort of 6 random profiles that you could get all feel very, very, very different. And again, that was a big part of what we were designing for. This was, we wanted to raise the bar. We wanted to make sure that this was sort of going to the next level, and that repeatability. So many of our guests who come to the Disneyland Resort come over and over again, and making sure there's always something new for them to see that they haven't seen before. And this gave that opportunity for that to happen.
All right.
The installation.
So we'll talk
Claire.
about how we did the physical component of this. Joe mentioned we had a very, very tight timeline. We actually inherited the ride January of last year, and we opened less than 6 months later. So as anybody knows, that's a aggressive, to say the least, construction schedule. So we wanted to talk about how we did this, but also kind of the expectation around that. We know our guests are savvy, and they assume with a 5+ month timeline, we're gonna do an overlay or a paint job. And our goal was to do a complete transformation. And we accomplished this by fabricating massive quantities of things off-site. We all know that the site is where time and money is a premium, and our goal was to have many, many, many streams of production happening tangentially. And this all goes back to this team understanding the core prompt so that anybody in any role was able to execute these multiple pieces. And it was fun. We knew that the guests did not expect this level of thing to arrive to this building, so we were able to make a bunch of stuff. We also were able to quality control things off-site, which is huge. We did a lot of studies with our vendors and our own internal paint specialists to get the tone right before we brought it to site, and then we could just really install it. Another thing that was instrumental for us was the use of mock-ups. We did very, very little traditional drawing on this project, as Joe has mentioned. We only really drew to convey design intent, which was a big shift for us internally. And the benefit of this is we were so easily able to realize our intent and to see if it worked or not, and then we could implement it. So we didn't spend a bunch of time drawing various versions of things. This also allowed our cinematic partners to be involved, to see the work that we were doing, making sure that we were true to the characters and the places of the films. And then behind this fabulous, blank canvas of scrim, we had this anticipation building. We knew that we were behind this shroud of secrecy where all these things were getting installed, and we were so excited about the amount of things we're able to do behind closed doors and to really exceed the guest expectation of what we were able to deliver. Which brings us to our grand reveal. We were so excited to deliver a texturally rich environment in this amount of time. And the fun part of this is these cinematic films take place all over the galaxy, but they also take place on Earth. So this needed to feel very, very genuine and relatable. Needed to feel like a place that really, truly could exist here on Earth, as well as, you know, other places in the cosmos, but it couldn't be a theme park interpretation. So we took great care to the details, creating a visual richness through very, very reflective surfaces and very, very grungy, grimy surfaces, and the use of color and contrast to make this feel just incredibly rich. And we think from, you know, the up-close details of the interior environment all the way to the dramatic lighting and this sense of power and power subversion all the way into the tone of the ride, this chaotic journey. We think we were really able to deliver upon this guest expectation and to provide them with this funny, mysterious, frenetic, joyful, chaotic experience.
And then we thought we were done.
Then we thought we were done. We weren't done.
But partway through, we got a request that said, hey, you guys have made this really changeable and flexible and updatable. How about we plan something for Halloween? We said, but that's like 4 months after we open. Yeah,
we're sleepy.
How about we do that? So we did Guardians of the Galaxy, Monsters After Dark. And this was a whole new challenge where we knew that there would be a lot of guests who hadn't seen sort of the brand new attraction that we opened last May, and yet we would then shift to a different show. So we have a different challenge. Can you keep the regular show during the day, and then we're just gonna flip a switch and then just change it all? Sure, no problem. But that's what we did. So this actually changed after dark. We literally flipped a switch. We changed all the lighting, changed the music, changed the tone, whole new story. Cast members changed, actually do a costume sort of overlay and change. And it was incredibly successful. So you will see more of that to come. But there's more change. I mean, the ability to continue to update and add things along the way in the same way that the film cinematic universe does is exactly what we've been asked to do, to continue to update it. So we had this idea to bring in these cute little creatures that we call Vailu, that we've been working on, that are interactive creatures that we put just actually a few months ago in the queue. But James Gunn loved them so much when he was seeing the development of these that you can see them in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So it's a great synergy that we have working with the studio that will allow us hopefully to continue to add these fun little Easter eggs as we go forward.
And these creatures know you're there. They
will follow you. They follow your sound. They follow you.
Watch you walk. It's not creepy at all when you're alone in the attraction at
So if
night.
you haven't seen them, go back over. Yeah. And of course, as we've said, without incredibly talented teams, there's no way we could have done this and brought it to the finish line. And so that's just, again, a small sampling of everybody who helped touch this attraction. So thank you all.
So I think we have time for questions, yes? How much time do we have for questions? What is my time frame?
A few minutes.
2 minutes for questions? We can take a question. Or you got your hand up pretty fast.
Yeah, one thing okay, Peter Kopic again from Wet Design. I'm trying to promote Wet. If you need a fountain, you can come to me. Thank you. You said one thing that fascinated me. You called it an adaptive or a process where you pick something that you decide that it's good and you're just adding to it. Has it ever happened that you kind of mined it and later on you figured out that it actually wasn't that good to work with?
The way we try to work is to a thematic goal rather than a physical goal. So the first thing you are assessing is, does this proposal meet the thematic goal? That's an immaterial assessment. It's just, will this tell the story and hit the emotional notes I need to hit? If the answer to that is yes, you're going to know that at the beginning. Now, the only question is, effectively, can I get this thing done in any form that still continues to address the emotional goal? So rather than creating a fixed material goal, which you can always fail at, right? This is not a material goal. It's an expressive goal. This thing, no matter what shape it ends up having, has got to convey to me a sense of fear through disorienting diagonals and color. So that's the goal, right? Go, right? You can try it like this. You get 2 steps in. Oh, that's not so good. How about this? But you don't have to go, you really don't have to go back, because the number of possible yeses is really quite wide, provided you are trying to achieve this immaterial goal. If you don't do it that way, you've drawn a very, very precise picture of exactly the thing you want, and anything that isn't that is a form of failure. So what this does is it increases confidence and autonomy in the team, because the number of right answers vastly outweighs the number of wrong answers. So they move quickly, and if there's a problem, they solve quickly. And provided that the solution doesn't violate the initial brief, I don't need to see it. It's still doing the thing it was supposed to do. I only need to mediate if there is an actual breakdown, which is actually rare.
Thank you.
All right. Joe, let's thank your Guardians of the Galaxy. And
Okay.
go on to Pandora. Thank you very much.
All right, good luck.
All right.
Now we're going to bring up the Pandora team. What I think we'll do with Pandora is go through both Pandora projects back to back, because it's really one big picture, and then we can hold questions to the end. That way, we'll make sure we handle content. So let's just bring everybody up. We've got Mark Levine, Joel Hormé. I've got Amy back there. She's getting rigged up, and Ed Fritz. They'll be up here in a second. Let me just go through this rather quickly as we're getting people up here. This is sort of the core of the team. There are, of course, many, many people that did this job, but we're going to touch on certain disciplines. Once again, this was a very, very challenging project. A project so challenging, and I think I am on record as saying this, that I wrote multiple memos advising us to not even try it because it was so fantastically, stupidly difficult to do. Which is probably the reason people thought, well, he's thinking about it, make him do it. So it's at Animal Kingdom, and we all know Animal Kingdom. It's a unique park. It derives all of its thematic property from the presence of these animals. It is about this world of animals, a world of authenticity, a world of detail, a world of rich kind of association, but with a very physical, very real world that we know. So how in the world are we going to put a science fiction property into the middle of this animal park? This is a fundamental question. And it is once again answered by going past the subject to the basal themes. Animal Kingdom is built around a set of foundational themes that are behind absolutely everything that goes into it, and they are these. And the entire team knows that they are these. The intrinsic value of nature, manifested by the dominance of landscape over man-made objects. Transformation through adventure, manifested by an element of surprise, the unexpected, and a sense that the environment is not under control. And a personal call to action, manifested by the idea that the story is always about you, choices you are going to make, and that we do not really tell stories that are about some beloved third person and something that happened to them some other time, somewhere else. So, when you filter Avatar through this filter, it lines up actually rather neatly on top of this. So these values give rise to the reality. They come from those animals. The animals are real. The animals are personal. The animals do stuff we don't know. We're creating a place that you can believe is real, and the detail that fills underneath it continues to enforce and live up to the level of detail of a live animal, which is all well and good when you're having this stuff made by Swahili craftsmen and Nepalese bronze casters and carvers in Bali, but now we are trying to make a completely imaginary world of Pandora, and that is exceedingly difficult. Now, it does line up with the value set. If you think about the movie Pandora and you think about intrinsic value of nature, transformation through adventure, personal call to action, that lines up very well. But the challenge of physically building such a thing is tremendous, and thank God I didn't have to do it all alone.
Oh, come on.
I give you Mark Levine, who is the chief writer.
I'm the chief writer on the project. Joe Rohde. Thank you. So yes, I was the chief writer on the project, and I also lead the story development team at Walt Disney Imagineering. And I'm so excited to be here, to be one of the people on this stage representing this project, which actually involves hundreds of people. Some of them are actually in this room. Hi, Chris, I see you. I'm gonna keep talking to you. So how did we start this project? And you know, you're gonna hear a lot over the next 20 minutes or so about design, about engineering, the artistry of it all. But they gave it to the writer to talk for a moment. So let's talk about the story. Because everything we do at the Walt Disney Company, of course, starts from this place of storytelling. And that's not just us, that is most of you as well. But it has always been true as our company. Story is one of, if not the most important starting point for what we do. This is actually from the 1950s. This is one of the animation films. It started with Walt. It fed into story group, which is not just writers, that was artists, that was researchers, that was a whole number of different talents that involved themselves in what is story. And then it fed into the overall machine. You could easily replace all of those different roles for roles at Imagineering, different disciplines. A lot of the skills that you all have in this room could easily fill into that, and story feeds into all of that. But we also know that when we talk about story in this arena, the dimensional world, we're not talking about it necessarily in the way we talk about it in movies and TV and books. You know, those are stories about characters on their, on a linear plot, a set of characters. And sometimes we do that. Sometimes in our shows, our attractions, our pre-show films, you know, you'll see your favorite character, your beloved character, you'll follow them, they'll send you on a mission, you'll be along with them for the ride. But it's not really about them, is it? It's really about you, the guest. And it's about you in a place experiencing something amazing, which becomes your story. That is what we do. That is what we all do. And so that is our starting point. We're always thinking about it as the guest. But then, of course, we're looking at Avatar. Avatar is a movie about characters and a plot and a time. If we had put this in one of our other parks, say Disney's Hollywood Studios, we may very well have said, you know, we are going to sort of have one of those characters send us on our way. We may have elements of that plot involved. We may be in the time of those movies. But at Animal Kingdom, as Joe has pointed out, that's about going to real places. And it's about you going to real places, back to those key themes. So for this, we said, no, it's not going to be about those characters, and it's not going to be about that plot, and we're not even going to live in the timeline of the movie. We are going to either set ourselves past it or maybe off to the side of it. James Cameron's making more films. So where do we set ourselves from a storytelling standpoint? We're just going to sort of push ourselves away from that. And we're going to go to a place. Animal Kingdom is about going to lands that aren't like our other parks. When you go to Africa at Animal Kingdom, you're going to the town of Harambe. You're going to one place. So that had to become our focus. So that became our approach to begin. And we had some creative goals. We wanted to visit Pandora. We want our guests to visit Pandora. We want to see the Na'vi, who are the indigenous population of Pandora. And I want to fly in a Banshee because it's super cool. So the way we approached the story development was, I'm just going to break it down to a couple of pieces. Key themes, foundational story questions, and sort of the layers of storytelling. We'll go through these kind of quickly because Joe has already talked a lot about key themes. Joe talks about this a lot with the team. And it's true, we all do follow this. And again, this isn't the story itself, this isn't the design. These are the actionable filters that get us to those things. These are the things we always come back to. So Animal Kingdom is famous for these three themes, and they absolutely influenced everything we did. They influenced the way we would approach the attraction stories and designs, the way we would approach with the shaman figure in our other attraction, Na'vi River Journey. It's the way we did the detailing in our area development. Even the things we sold in the stores played into that. That Banshee was actually about a personal call to action. It absolutely fit into those themes. So it influenced everything we did on this project. Another thing we do are foundational story questions. These are really obvious. These look really obvious. But it's amazing how many times projects don't do this. So we absolutely did this when we approached this work. It's like, where are we? Who are the inhabitants? And what's my role as a guest? So where are we? So when you're thinking about where are we in a theme park or really anything, you're thinking about it in two ways. You're thinking about it intellectually. Where am I? What's the metaphor for this place that I'm in? If I'm doing it about, attraction about this room, what is the metaphor of this room? Well, it's a ballroom or something set up for presentations today. I understand that the second I walk in. So you have to understand that. That's the intellectual part. But emotionally, how do I feel when I'm in this room? And that's in fact, almost more important than understanding what the place is. So where are we? Well, for this, we knew we had to go to Pandora. Pandora is where the world of Avatar is set. That's an amazing world. But if I don't know that movie, or if I was too young when it came out, or if I've forgotten it, where am I really going? Well, it comes down to the feeling of going to a national park. At the end of the day, going to this one place feels like a national park, but it's on an alien world. So I'm going to a national park in an alien world. That's something I can understand. We've all been to a national park, most of us, and we know that this thing that we've built is alien, very clearly. So that becomes where are we going. The actual land itself, if you start to look into the storytelling, is an old mining camp. I don't even have to know that it belonged to the RDA, which is in the movie. Whoever was there is long gone, and the buildings they've left behind become where our restaurant is and where our merchandise shop is, where our area restroom. These are all buildings left behind. Our two big attraction buildings, an enormous building, really this houses both attractions, Flight of Passage and Navi River Journey. Well, we had to hide those because you can't see them in a park that is all about nature. So those big buildings aren't something we wanted to see. We hid them behind mountains, both sort of a real mountain range that we could all understand and floating mountains, very unique to Pandora. You'll hear a lot more about those in a minute. So that became sort of our approach to having nature lead, because again, this is Animal Kingdom. The buildings we did see, they looked like they were old military buildings have been redone and made beautiful by whoever is here now, and using indigenous sort of art and techniques. Who are the inhabitants? Who lives in this land, this place that we ended up calling the Valley of Mawara? Well, if we're doing a national park, you need rangers. You need somebody who's going to manage that park. If you're going to get people to Pandora, you also need a tour company. So we combined those two things to become Alpha Centauri Expeditions. That became our first group. And that becomes our cast members who are going to be helping you with our experiences. They're going to help serve you things in the food and give you things in the restaurant, and also sell you things in the merchandise shop. But this is also Animal Kingdom. There's another level of storytelling we want to do. It's a park about animals. It's about conservation. It's about, in this land, habitat restoration. That's part of our backstory. So we had a second group, Pandora Conservation Initiative. They became our science group. So more of our cast members were involved in this group. But that's still not enough. Two big organizations aren't very real, and this is a park about being real. So we wanted one more group, and we wanted a group of people that just love Pandora, live there. Maybe they were there after the conflicts. Maybe they've come. Maybe they've been born on Pandora, hang out with the Na'vi. That became expats. Those became people that just love the place and know it better than anyone else. So those became our entertainers. That became some of our small business owners. So these three groups are the inhabitants of our land, and those are our cast members. Now, who are we? When we show up here, are we space rangers? Are we adventurers, explorers? Well, who are we when we are doing these various things? Well, this is a park, again, that has some key themes that we always come back to, as Joe has said. Transformation through adventure means your transformation through your adventure. It's about you. So when you come to this park with your phone and all the things you carry with you today, you're you. You come here to go on these. And and back to that realism for a second, we always treated this as real. And so even when we talked about the attractions, they weren't going to be attractions. We considered them excursions. We considered them expeditions. We considered them real. When we went to D23 events, we always treated it as real. We went up to Pandora, or here's a model of the thing we're doing up on Pandora. We even all pretended we worked for Ace at that point, just to be real the whole way through. Finally, I want to talk about the layers of storytelling. This is very quick. But as Joe had mentioned earlier, I think in the Guardians part of the presentations, we always have to speak to a base level. And these layers have to all happen at the same time. You have to be able to speak to anybody that doesn't know the film, doesn't know anything about Avatar, doesn't know anything about Pandora. All they know is they're in this national park in an alien world. And so every time, every beat of everything we did always had to speak to everybody. At the same time, if you know Avatar very, very well, if James Cameron walks this land, which he did a number of times, it has to hold up for him as well. It has to be very true to the mythology. And then the one more level, which isn't always the case for us, those first two, base level, true to the mythology, always true. This third one, I think, is sort of unique to Animal Kingdom. And that is that it has to speak to the core missions of Animal Kingdom. This shouldn't be able to be anywhere else the way we approach the story. It can only happen here. So that became the foundation, the storytelling foundation of everything we did in this project. And so now, talking about how it is actually built with real things, Jolt.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm assuming you guys are pretty exhausted by now, but we're going to try to make this fairly expedient. And I'd like to say that I'm extremely honored to be on the stage with all these wonderful professionals, and also to be able to tell you guys what we do as the leaders of our industry. So basically, you guys heard about a little bit, the narrative. You guys are going to hear about a little bit about the media and the ride, but I'm here to tell you about who we are as far as placemakers to create the environment where our guests can come and get immersed and support the story and the storyline. We have a small studio within Imagineering. It's called the Theme Finishes Art Studio that comprises of 4 major disciplines: rock work, character facade, theme paint, and hardscape. And we are the kind of unique group of professionals who focus on the different facets of the narrative and support it with a visual, underlying. Am I pushing the right button? Yeah. Okay, so basically, we skipped a couple slides, I'm sorry, but our first encounter with Animal Kingdom was the Tree of Life. And we assembled way back then a very international team to create this very special project that led us to Pandora 18 years later. And interestingly, about 70–80% of the team was participating on creating Pandora after 18 years. So that's kind of a family, if you will, working together on a daily basis on a construction site.
Slide behind. You're on Pandora right now. That's your Pandora slide. That's
but why is it not dissolving?
No, you're good. It'll go next.
Something's not right.
That's where you are.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Sorry.
All right. You on? You're there.
Yeah. So basically, we create these environments not only with time-proven techniques, but we are always trying to go for the cutting edge and come up with modern technologies to support the variety of techniques and methods that creates our environments. For instance, like Avatar. Now, this is a very special project, obviously. And I remember the day when, Joe just came to the office and said, you know what, I don't know, maybe we're just going to, do floating mountains. And I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. But, me and my team kind of went to work and tackled that not everyday task, if you will. Basically, we created floating mountains that are connected with amazing structures of vines that's covered with flora that only is indigenous to Pandora, and use techniques to tell the story of how nature can take over at the end of the day and cover up and revitalize, the war zone that at one day way back Pandora had to go through. I'm just going to kind of walk you through really quickly on a high level on each step what it takes to create something like Pandora as an attraction. We start with the concept, And we have a very experienced dimensional design team that takes the concept and turns it into a three-dimensional model, which we use different scales for different purposes. Once the model is completed, then we take that and turn it into a digital format, digital data bank to create the full-scale version of the design. This was probably the only time when we had the chance to work with structural engineers, one of the finest in the industry, to create an illusion that these mountains are actually really floating. So we worked just about up to a year on daily basis and kind of tweaked and tweaked and tweaked and tweaked and tweaked. Imagine, this was kind of excruciating because, we wanted to make it look organic and, unrecognizable that it's a structure, but they had to do their job too to hold up the mountain. So it was kind of like a back and forth for a whole year until we came to that final result. Once that was done, then obviously you can see the steel structure, which looks like a gigantic porcupine. Really, you can almost hardly shoot an arrow through it, but it does the job. And then once that's done, and the mountain, that we cover them up with the substructure, which is called the chip structure, and then we cover that with the cement that we sculpt. And then once that's completed, then comes the character paint on top of all that to finish off the story. This just shows you, what the model looked like. This is a 1/2 inch to a foot scale model. And then after a lot of work and a lot of time, it turned into this, which is the finished product. And, on a project like Avatar, there's so many components that we never done before, and so many questions and tasks that it really is an exploration, frankly, although we've been doing this for decades, in the theme industry and creating places and environments, but still, to come up with something like that, it really put everybody to the task. Now, besides the 4 major disciplines, of course, we have many, many other very talented and well-rounded artisans who creates murals, color boards, creates the color neighborhoods, figures out the color palette. Blacklight artist who takes the story inside as well from a theme environment point of view. And also, of course, we kind of spread this knowledge through with the different techniques and methods, even into hardscape, to make the paths look bioluminescent like you had seen in a movie. To create the environment, the mountains were one thing, but we had to create a whole flora beneath the floating mountains that conveys the same story that you are on Pandora. And we had to come up with plant life that nobody's ever seen before, nor done before. So we had to come up with different materials, techniques, and basically invent a completely new planet, or not a new, but a different planet from Earth. And this just shows you the team working diligently in creating all the beautiful different flora of Pandora. And this is just some examples of the different species that we had to come up or try to come up with. Actually, some of these patterns, we went to Bali with Joe and a few of us and kind of looked for different plant life that, that looks unearthly and doesn't remind you, oh, I know that's an oak tree. So we kind of took those patterns and turned them into, light poles, handrails, bridges, so on and so forth. And of course, the Pandoran plants, they were very challenging because we really wanted to make sure that they're very believable, number one. Number two, they hold up to the elements. It's all at exterior. UV, wind, hurricane, so on and so forth. So we worked very, very hard to come up with the right materials, the right way of building them, constructability, and so on and so forth. And work with other disciplines like landscape architects that work with us together to create a flora that that doesn't, you walk through the attraction, you can't kind of pick out which one is real, which one is not, and that was, I think that turned out very successful. And these are just some of the examples of the different plant life. They're all artificial. This is part of the central water feature. We realized that in order to create a feeling that the plants are all submerged in water, waterfalls, little creeks, so on and so forth, obviously we cannot use real plants. So we had to come up with a system that can emulate real plants, but they can withstand, the water treatment and stay colorful and fresh for, years to come. Or flowers. Different kinds, dozens and dozens and dozens of different types of species we had to come up with and try to nail it as accurately as possible so it looks very believable. And also, this is an image of the nighttime feel of the land, with some projections, and really wanted to make sure that the Pandora feel stays all the way through the night. So when people walk around and our guests while experiencing, the exterior and the place of Pandora, it gives you different feels and different experiences as the day goes by. And this is an example how the real plants actually co-resides with the artificial plants, and it's kind of hard to pick out which one is which. And of course, I'm sure you heard that already today, but this is a very important part of what we do. It's all an amazing team effort, and being in the placemaking part of our industry, we work around the globe and we develop a team that is really, really one of the most international group of people I've come across with, and which brings a lot of knowledge, experience, different way of thinking to create the very special product that we're after on each different project. And this is just going to show you where we're all from. It's really international. So. We live together like a family, work together like a family. We spend a lot of time together after work, and that's what makes us very strong and cohesive to tackle no matter what the project needs are. And finally, I'd just like to show their faces as well. It's one big happy group. And I would like to thank you for your patience and your attention. And I'd pass it back to Joe.
All right. Okay, as I said, we're going to roll right through because it's really all one big story. So we're going to go right into the attraction. Obviously, people don't fly across the United States of America or the world to just look at architecture. They want to do something. We had an attraction we needed to put in. I mean, this land is beautiful, but the ride is a very, very limited experience, a very short period of time to capture an emotional feeling. So the work that Jolt and his team does really should be considered as part of a holistic line leading to the moment of the ride. We put a lot of work into trying to have this seamless quality where logically I could still be in the world from the time I entered the land all the way through the queue, all the way up to the moment I got on that ride and started flying. So in theory, I'm flying in the same place I'm walking through. That can only work if the level of detail of the built environment and the CG environment are comparable. Now, if you haven't done this, I'm going to go really, really quick through what this is like. You start out in the land, walking around in the place. There are no big marquees. Everything is signified with these big woven totems. Because this is a ritual flight of passage. It's like a rite of passage, a flight of passage. You're following these totems up into the mountains because you load at like 30 feet. And we take you into environments where we're telling you this story in a variety of mediums. We introduce this whole painted cave. It's not from the film. to get across the idea of ritual, of ceremony, and then paint it across the ceiling of the cave is everything that's going to happen to you. There's no secret about what is going to happen to you. We tell you what is going to happen to you. You're going to go on this flight. There's scary stuff. And then, of course, we set up this whole ritual ceremony thing, and the RDA has bored a giant hole right through the middle of it, leading to what was their old facility, which has fallen into ruins. But this allows us to introduce this second idea, that there is science here, that the means by which you're going to do this is science. And all the science that is in here that's happening now is no longer mining. This is all biological restoration projects. Essentially, Pandora, the world of Avatar, is a giant super fun cleanup site. So all of the experiments that you encounter when you go through this lab are all actual versions of something that would really be being done by scientists to clean up the water, to clean up the land, to restore native populations of animals. And that is why we are able to participate in this Fly on the Banshee program, because we're collaborating with the indigenous people on the restoration of the environment that sustains the population of the banshees. Therefore, we get to fly on the banshees, which is very similar to something that would happen were you to go on safari somewhere, or where you go to some game reserve in South America or something. So we, again, are telling you everything you need to know within the context of that ride, because when it comes time to fly, all you want to do is fly. Like, get out of my face, stop talking to me, I don't want to hear a thing, I don't want a special rule, I want to fly. The other thing we do that's kind of sneaky is we sneak you into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller spaces. And we do not tell you how big that fly space is, so you don't know. So when you finally load into this vehicle, the wall is within reach. If you reached out, please don't, because it makes greasy finger spots. You could touch the wall in front of you. And this is this moment of compression. We've taken you from the premise of ritual to the premise of science to this premise of duty and ceremony and put you in this room, and you're about to be launched off on the ride. Now, before I turn it over to Ed, I'll just talk about one little clever thing. There are, of course, 16 people in a row on 3 floors in this thing. Ed will explain this. But the moment you launch on this ride, you dive. And what your body does psychologically when you dive is it ratchets your vision down. So from the moment this ride begins, it's exceedingly difficult for you to remain aware of the system, because the psychology of your brain wants you to look where you're going, because you're going fast. If we had any ancestors that ran really fast through the savannas of Africa looking like this, they're all gone. So we could bank on this. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ed, who's going to talk through the ride system.
Thank you, Joe.
And we're going to try and buy back some question and answer time. So
Okay, great. Yeah, you're in the middle of your... Excellent. Let's get through your slides here. Okay, so I'd like to talk a little bit about the development of the ride system. So to create a ride of this complexity and magnitude, it takes a team of exceptional experts, a team of consultants, Imagineers, and suppliers to put it all together. And that team of technical experts, they spend time doing analysis and making drawings and running tests. But before all that begins is where I'd like to talk about what happens between the point when we have the idea for the ride system, and how do you get from that point to a point when you can provide engineers with enough information to start to do their work. So that takes me back about maybe 6 years before the big team was assembled. It was a handful of us working, and I remember a meeting with Joe. I'll put you on the spot here. I remember meeting with Joe, and we were talking about what these ride systems could be in this Avatar world, and we hit on the idea of flying on a Banshee. And sounds fun, sounds like a great idea. So Joe started talking in his most colorful way and describing this idea he has in his brain to me. And as he's talking, I'm more engrossed in what he's saying and falling in love with this idea. And he talked about how the ride system would have to feel like an individual experience, but for many people. And I need to feel what it feels like to be on the back of a Banshee. I want to feel the wind in my hair. I want to feel mist in my face. And I went on and on and on and on. And when he finished, he turned to me and said, "So Ed, can we do this?" So what comes out of my mouth is, oh yeah, we can do that. Sure, no problem. Well, then I realized that was my outside voice. So then my inside voice is, hey, how are we going to do that? And that really is the moment when the challenge began, or the adventure began for the engineering team, the ride engineering team. And really the answer to that question is mock-ups. We use mock-ups to get from a creative idea to information engineers can use to do their work. And we use the mock-ups to define the ride experience. So we knew the chair would have many features in order to deliver this convincing experience. So we got some plywood, foam, sprinkler pipe, and fishing poles. And we started to make mock-ups. Here's an example, the first mock-up. Let's take some plywood, give Joe some screwdrivers, and say, so when you're on the back of a Banshee, so how do you sit? Are you forward? Are you back? Where are your hands? How does this all work? So, we get ourselves in these positions on these mock-ups and start to take photographs and pull out protractors and measure on the picture of the mock-up what the angle is and where the handle grips need to go. And then, so we need grab bars that react all the loads from the guests hanging on tight because they're in fear for their lives in that first dive off the cliff. But we want the grab bars to feel organic. We want the chair to transform from a techie laboratory chair into feeling like you're really on the back of an animal. So they need to be flexible. Well, fishing pole's a good idea. So we use that. And then we built another mock-up to help us with the haptic sensors that are on the chairs. The sensors vibrate and give you some sensations when you go through the link experience from the laboratory into the world of Avatar. More mock-ups that helped us with angles. How much do we need to lean to the left or lean forward or back? More mock-ups helped us with the audio development. We have onboard audio on each of these link chairs. So after a very long time and many, many more mock-ups than what I just showed, we came up with a list of all the features that need to be in each one of these chairs. So that took some doing because there's not much space and there's a lot of stuff on the list. So did some engineering work, started to design a prototype chair. Here's a couple of shots of our first prototype, some fiberglass work and foam work, and we built a first prototype. This is number one, not on the ride. This is strictly a prototype shown here in the picture being used for some more onboard audio development. So once you have a chair, now the next obvious step is to fly it. Right? Put it on a tower and see if it's smooth enough, see if it really feels like you're flying, see if it's quiet enough. So we proceeded to build ourselves we need a tower to fly our link chair. So we proceeded to build ourselves a tower, 60 foot tall, couple of levels, 8 rows across. And we constructed this tower not only for the ride development, but also to help Amy and her team with developing the media and working out how to synchronize the motion of the chair with the media. So here's a picture of Jenny had some last minute edits apparently. So we don't have any pictures of the tower, but maybe someday she'll let me show those to you. This is the problem with being the ride engineer. You can't really show what you do to other people. It's unfortunate. Okay, so at the end of the day, we ended up with a link chair. This is the design of the final link chair with all of the features shown, a lot of stuff to pack into each chair. I'll end with one of my favorite picks, and a pick that the team is very, very proud of. These two images are separated by about 4 years in time. One of them is the artistic model or vision of what the link chair wants to be and look like, and the other image is the number one chair that's out there flying in Pandora land today, Avatar land.
So Amy Jupiter's going to talk next, right?
Yes, Amy's
Yeah,
up next.
so all of this leads up to the actual experience of the flight itself, which of course is a virtual world presented to you through a rather sophisticated assemblage of media and the relationship between that media and all the motion and all the effects in this chair. I'm going to let Amy take you through that. I'll be over here to the side. Remember, we're going to try to save ourselves a little time for Q&A.
I am going to go very quickly, I promise. So, Pandora World of Avatar and the Flight of Passage media development. So, we start with concept art, like everybody else, And I'm going to show you a little bit about what our target was. Remember Jake's first flight? So we have this bar to stand up to, the movie. And go.
Level out! That's it.
So, a flight of passage, a rite of passage. And so a three-act structure for our film. So we start out with scaring the bejesus out of you, and we challenge you. And then after you're challenged, you know that it's going to be okay. And so I'm going to take you through a little bit of our journey and a little bit of the filmmaking journey with a little bit of a sizzle reel. So we have this beautiful painting by Yuri Bartoli. We worked really closely with the Lightstorm art department. And, but we had to get to our ride profile. What's the quickest way to get to your ride profile? So Act 3, the ballet of motion capture. This actually is the way we captured our first ride profile, because it's really so much easier to actually have Joe do interpretive dance. And then, what a great part of our process is the camera lives in the same files as the ride profile. So the camera from the motion picture lives in the same file system as the chair. So you can see the ride spline. We'll follow our guide, which is our anchor, our visual anchor. And then you can see we're always driving Ed's ride. We never go too far from driving the ride system and understanding our guest perspective. The visuals develop along with the ride system, and it gets more and more advanced. We actually built 120 kilometers worth of landscape in order to fly over that, and the picture develops along with that. So some of the things we can show. We obviously had a giant robot arm and a flat screen. It helps us to talk about and what we were feeling. What is it like to fly? Obviously, we always stay with the limits given to us by our ride team, and a lot of motion builder. Both teams, both the animation team that built the template, the film template, and the ride animator work in the same piece of software that gives us our sync. And obviously, having fun. We got a lot of support from Ed's team building those big towers. And you can see a little bit of those towers. The seat also is a character. And one false move in the seat takes us out of the story. So the seat is actually one of the supporting characters. We use the ride animation procedurally to generate the wing flaps. You can always see that we're paying attention to the limits, which are on the right-hand side. Lots of water, soaring over Pandora. So, to the filmmakers. This is obviously a set. This is obviously a lot of water on Pandora. Really hard in visual effects. So many computers. We brought, well, can't talk about that either. But this is an art-directed simulation. We used many, many simulations in order to perfect the art of the wave, or the green room. Obviously, lots of water and waterfalls. There you go. Hold on 1 second. We'll go back one slide. So while we have dimensional universe, we also have dimensional sound. And that helps us to ground you in the experience as well. And mixing in the theater. A lot of things happen in the theater. We target all of our sound towards our audience. We can control a lot of things in order to keep you in the universe. We had a lot of geometry. So over, that 120 kilometers is actually made up of billions and billions of path-traced polygons. And we could not render everything at once, so also our compositing tools are, we developed many different types of ways to composite, because a 10K by 10K frame at 60 frames a second, for 4.5 minutes, we actually produced more imagery than there is in a motion picture. We had over 70,000 simulated elements. Obviously, we did not have that many animators, so we used a massive piece of software to generate 90 simulations, and that's what you're looking at. We color corrected in the field because everything in that dome needs to look like it belongs there. So that is the media for Flight of Passage.
So, of course, this ride has lots of elements in it which are technical achievements. The seat alone, the drive system for the seat, the screen, the sound, the software that went into it. But I do believe what really, really makes it work is an extraordinary level, a truly extraordinary level of coordination of those parts. What you are sensing, those of you that have ridden the ride, is an extremely deliberate, very pointed, down to the frame, coordination of like motion, music, not just imagery, specific points of imagery, focus, sound, all lining up. We would extend a second into 60 frames, move things around within 60 frames to line them up, so you keep experiencing this stuff come to a point, and then come to a point, and come to a point. And that amount of polish, that amount of finish, makes a difference between just a cumulative bunch of effects and stuff and something that's on the other side of that. And I don't know, many of you, I assume, have ridden this, but it does seem to sit on the other side of a cumulative effect of its pieces. So we have time for questions on anything that you've heard. So we'll open the floor and we'll ask questions until someone stops us.
Hello.
Okay, very good.
Hi, Don McBain, independent media producer, theme parks, museums. Describe to me the process you used in determining your interaxial or your, your stereo, and did you expand it or contract it, and what you did to make that work well for the ride?
So obviously this is an omnidirectional stereo film. So that, so we did have to develop a lens. Jim does very honest stereo. Everything behind that screen plane is beyond the screen plane. Our plane of convergence is that screen plane. So sometimes we cheat. It animates. It absolutely animates. As far as we do not pander here to the stereo for us gives us depth and grandeur. So I'm not sure if I'm going to really be able to specifically answer your question because of the technical nature of it.
One thing we did definitely try to do is the screen is quite large in order to keep the screen physically very far away from you, so you don't receive any counter information between the stereo, the optical stereo information you're receiving from the glasses and the muscular information of your eyeballs. Like if I'm looking at a 3D image from this far away on this plane, the muscles of my eye, even though the image is 3D, they know this thing is only here. By keeping that screen far away, you didn't have that disorienting sense of cancellation that sometimes shows up in 3D because the surface was miles away from you. So you couldn't find that surface with the interocular focus of your own eyes. It's all beyond the interocular, the entire surface. So that means anything you see on the surface, you kind of have to buy.
Over here.
Hey guys, Dave Cobb from ThinkWell. A huge fan of so many things about Flight of Passage and the entire land, but in particular, the sound on the ride, I have a question about. What I love is that it starts out completely diegetic. That when you start the ride, it's absolutely real. It's just wind. It's almost as if the music at the end and this emotional swell of that is earned by the end of your journey. Was that a conscious choice, and what led you to that?
Yes, that is a precise, conscious, and initial choice. It was part of the initial conceptual crafting of the very idea that we are going to open with something you would believe is real. And actually what's going on, since we're pros in here, there are levels. In the first act, there are musical tones, but they are all sourced inside the land. It's somebody on a horn, it's the call of an animal, it's in the land. So you get whatever musical, emotional cueing you get is in the sound environment that you are in. The actual score starts with that creature that comes up out of the ocean. But everything is so loud and distracting in the second act that you tend to not notice that it is fully scored, straight through. So really, by the time we let you have this score, which is a reward, it is the reward, right? The emotion, the motion, the score, the warmth of the visuals is the reward. You've been listening to a score for a whole act, right? But you haven't been noticing the score until we let you free into this sky to have the score. So it sneaks in very deliberately, because first we need you to believe, right? You gotta believe. And so but then somehow you're believing like I'm flying and there's music. From where? You know, the London Philharmonic is flying with me. Where are they coming from?
Joe, we've got a question here, and then there are going to be two over here.
Okie dokie.
Hi, John Spencer, Marswood Enterprises. How did you deal with the issue that human beings cannot breathe the atmosphere on Pandora?
Actually, the answer to that is not proprietary to us. But we set our story an entire generation after all of the events that happen in any of James Cameron's movies. And these events handle a panoply of relational issues. Presumably, by the time we're doing this, you can only get to this planet on a structured tour, which you are on, and we have taken care of that. But I cannot, in fact, talk about that. But we have taken care of the fact that you can breathe the audience because you're not getting there. It's not like you drive up in your car, right? We got you there. We're the tour company. We take care of the chemistry. You just enjoy the planet. The same sense, you can't really just show up at the Galapagos. Someone has to get you there and take care of it. So we, the tour company, have taken care of all that. But in the vast world that is coming of all this stuff, there are so many variations of details that sort of doesn't become the issue that it is when you think of just one film.
Hello. Okay, so I have a question I'm Mallory. I'm Mallory Paddock. I'm from Visual Terrain. I have a question regarding the stomach drop feeling. It's the feeling right when you dive off at the very beginning of the ride. I find that as an adult, it's hard to find that experience again. It's far more prevalent when you're a child and your inner ear hasn't developed yet. I've never seen it happen or felt it happen on a simulation. I found it on a swing set or on a roller coaster. Is that done with intention, and how do you achieve that?
Well, that gets back, I think, to...
the illusion of this is quite... Well, the really amazing part of it is that physically you're only doing it for a second. The 4-second sustained drop that we happen to be able to pull off is the illusion of all of the elements working together. Right. So all of the ride and the pull up and the sensation that is in the media. So I don't know. I don't want to
shatter any dreams, but your brain only registers acceleration. It does not register speed, or we could not fly in jet airplanes. So once I accelerate you, I can show you anything. And you will believe that this is the source of the acceleration that you felt. And you will extend that sense of acceleration for quite some time without actually feeling any. So that feeling is largely psychological. It's not actually like being on a swing, because it's kind of not really happening.
Well, it's also supported by the guide, and the guide,
Well, yes.
and then that first lift off, and then the dive. So the whole choreography is emotional. It's emotion, emotion, emotion. So, yeah, illusion.
Okay, hi, my name is Nahita. Anna hit for impact's sake. I accept anything, correct letters in correct order. I'm a USC Next Gen. My question is actually two questions related to story. The first question I had was, how does this lead to a call to action, which you said is in the core of the animal kingdom? And the second question is, how do you deal with the dynamic between we need to give people enough ownership that they feel that this is their adventure, but we cannot give them power because this is a simulation that's supposed to cater to like thousands of people.
Right. So the land itself proposes to be this Superfund cleanup site. And throughout the land, if you pay attention, just the same as you can go to South America on a lovely rainforest vacation and not notice that every 30 minutes someone is talking to you about deforestation, animal loss, habitat destruction, et cetera, the same thing is going on here. If you pay attention in that land, there are constant references to environmental problems, environmental duties, obligations of ourselves to engage. You have the docents, you have the wilderness explorers thing. So in that sense, you are exposed to this issue in the framework of this land that's actually, a fantasy. But it relates directly to these real issues, right? And then we have our players who are there, and they're there to engage with, and they do engage.
Banshee too. I mean, the banshee is considered a keystone species, right?
By the time you get on the banshee, we've done all this talk about how it's a keystone species. What is a keystone species? There's all that. Your second question is about engagement, immersion, et cetera. That's a much longer answer. To me, the land offers the opportunity for self-driven engagement. You can explore indefinitely in this land. The ride is immersive. Now, when we talk about immersion nowadays, people tend to conflate immersion with interactive control, right? Like immersion equals some form of real or imaginary button that I push, making things happen in the world. I'm not necessarily convinced that that is the first level of immersion. I think narrative immersion, which is what that ride accomplishes, is the first level of immersion. To be able to believe that this is real. To be so, psychologically swept up by what's happening that you don't care that it is an artifice. That's really what immersion is, because otherwise it's just real, and that's not theater. So the ride, because of its nature, can't let you control it. Were you to control it, the experience would become a cognitive learning experience. It's a very different kind of emotional experience. This is what we're trying to create is a deeply immersive, rather spiritual experience of transport. To do that, you kind of need to surrender yourself to the ceremony, right? And let it take you away. So it's a branch in the road of decisions of what kind of experience we even intend to offer in the context of this ride. And since we're trying to excite these emotions that ultimately can be transferred to the world of nature, where you can take real action for real and do something real, we want the emotion first. That's what we're really shooting for, that you will transfer this emotion to real conservation action, doing something real, for real, like that.
Hi, I'm Sam from the Nassau Company. I studied ethnomusicology at UCLA, and during that time we were really lucky in that we got James Horner to do a guest lecture, and he brought the ethnomusicologist who worked on the film. And I'm wondering, did you guys have an ethnomusicologist that worked on this project to create the soundscape and all the music, and more so, was there a difference between the music that we heard and saw and experienced in the film versus what we're experiencing in the land, and is it different than what we see, and even so on the ride for the regions that we might visit, or anything specific to the culture that we touch and see in this land?
So, and other people please chime in. We started with James Horner, but the premise with James, before he passed away, was that we are starting from the seed root of the score of the film, and starting from the sense that, because there's a huge amount of research into instrumentation, rhythm patterns, all kinds of stuff that form that base. However, this is not a revisitation of the film. So all creative content from this point forward is new. We will recompose. We will create additional compositions. We will create alternative compositions. So we started from, there's a base, but this product, this narrative product's completely different. Its needs are different, its emotional needs are different, and the things we need to punctuate are different. What happened is that Simon Franklin, who had worked for years with John, took over. He became the lead composer. We used the files that had already been created. He is an ethnomusicologist as well. He had additional sounds we created. So by the time we were done, we have a huge range. If you really wander that land listening, there is a huge range of new sound in that land that's very, very specific to its own. It's back to this idea of you can't really do this by pastiching together pieces of something that already exists, because it is, by its nature then, not fully complete. It's a collage, right? We don't want a collage. We want a holistic thing that resonates as one thing. So you've got to compose to that holistic thing. So if you hear it in that land, I don't think there's anywhere you hear a needle drop score from the film, just played straight from the film. I don't think that happens.
Okay, Joe, we have two more questions.
Okay.
One is right here, and then the second one is with Mr. Conti, and that'll finish it.
Hi, I'm Kate First from Visual Terrain. I was just really struck by all of the detail of the rock work and the plant life and everything. It's so beautiful and so textural. And then also the transformation from a daytime environment where you can see all of that kind of detail to the nighttime environment is very different in Pandora than really anywhere else. And so I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that change in environment and how that happens.
Well, that's Jolt. I don't know how much you, that's, you start.
Start and you finish, yeah. Well, basically, obviously, we wanted to create something very special during the daytime, and Animal Kingdom, prior to Pandora, was basically a daytime park. So one of the goals and the initiatives adding Pandora was to extend the time of the experience for our guests so they can stay actually after dark and enjoy and experience something, you know, during the night hours, or the evening hours rather. So basically we really made a conscious effort to design the landscape and the mountains and the projection and the bioluminescent touch on the flat work hardscape areas, and the same incorporating the bioluminescent illuminating effect into the plants. So actually, you know, when the sun goes down, the plants actually come alive. and the projection kicks in. And if you look at the mountains, you see little fireplaces up in the cave and the benches flying by. So we really, really wanted to make sure that the land actually comes alive just the same when the sun comes up, when the sun goes down.
It's because it's an anchor in the very idea, which is a marketing idea, that we're going to run this park into the night, that it's much harder to do if all you're going to do is turn the lights on like, oh, look, you can stay, it's nighttime now. So we really wanted it to be extraordinary. Now, the finish level, as you comment on, that is Jolt and Jolt's international team of sculptors who are capable of mind-boggling technical and sculptural accomplishments. And also, this thing we mentioned when we were talking about Guardians, there's a continue open-ended funnel at the open end of this. So there are plants in that land that only came to exist because there were craftsmen sitting at tables with raw materials and time to go, well, what about a thing like this? We'll make a thing like this. We're here, it's now, we're working, we got stuff, we did the other stuff, let's do more stuff.
Lots of stuff.
And the only way that can work is if you have that same philosophy of, look, if it's not wrong, it's probably right. Do it, let's make it be right. So you get tremendous richness that you cannot put into a document. It would be crazy to put that richness into a document. It would take you as long as to do the job. But you have to have some way to know that the richness that's going to be created is going to still head in the right direction. And that has to do, as Mark said, with sticking to the brief. Stay on brief. Now, I know we have one more question. I don't want to...
The last question.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Chris Conti with Electrosonic. The collaboration in the arts is absolutely fantastic with Disney, but this one is off the charts, so congratulations to you all. But I want to know about James Cameron. Was he involved in the creative or the development? And ultimately, what was his reaction or his satisfaction meter when he saw the end result?
So we spoke with James Cameron very, very early. James Cameron saw this in exceedingly punctuated views across long stretches of time. We met with him very early on to make sure that the underlying thematic brief that Avatar equals Animal Kingdom, that these value systems are the same, and that we are going to express this value system through your property, you're good with that, right? So he's like, yeah, that sounds great. We love that. The people who we dealt with on a daily basis, and truly this became like a team extension daily basis, are John Landau, Richie Bainham, lots of the production designers, that level of people. We worked on an almost daily basis crafting what this thing was going to be. And then they would report to Cameron, or Cameron would come and see it at these punctuated things, which meant he was more, in a way, like a guest, right? He would see it after these long periods and have a rather fresh reaction to what he was seeing. And towards the end, I think we saw him at a little bit more punctuated, like, hey, we're going to be open in 6 months, you know, now we're going to be open in 3, now we're open. But really, it was his people who we were with on an absolutely daily basis. Cameron is really, really smart. He was a fantastically supportive, avuncular supportive of the entire team. He works in a slightly different world than ours, but being a really smart guy, he's always trying to figure out how we're doing stuff. And so the fact that we were actually solving problems differently than he thought, he also was like, oh, who would have thought that? So it was really kind of fun. It was actually a really fun, enjoyable relationship, fantastically collaborative, very even-handed. I don't believe we could have done what we did without this chemistry. It just would have been different. The chemistry produced a really, really, really rich project and a culture, because of the two cultures, a culture of kind of obsessive polish and high achievement. And that, I think, is the other thing people sense out of this.
Thank you, Joe. Everybody join me. And the entire Avatar team and the Guardians team. And we'd all love to work with you.
bringing up our president.
Oh, our president. Hello,
Please
President.
welcome the Themed Entertainment Association's president, David Woodridge. All right, David.
So both a duty and a pleasure of being president is basically to say a few thank yous. Today's been a great day. Thank you to our stalwarts of day 2, Pat and Roberta, and I hope you've enjoyed the trip that we've taken around the world together. That's one of the things I really love about day 2 of the summit, and I think it just shows how international our industry is. The common thread through all the projects that we've seen today, no matter what the budget level was, what country it's come from, what culture it's come from, is passion, and we see that all the time throughout the TEA. So we're almost at mixer time and beer time, but I just want to say a final thing, almost. Obviously today's not got a huge support team behind it with Jenny and Tammy and the whole of the TEA staff. These events really are not possible without the sponsorship of many of you in the room, not just this event, all TEA events. Thank you for sponsoring. Thank you for traveling here from near and far. And thank you to all our volunteers that have made everything work. Thank you.
Thank you. And a huge round of applause and appreciation from Pat and I both to all of you for being an amazing audience. We are only now at 6:30, so you're going to get to go earlier to cocktails rather than later. But finally, to every one of our TEA Thea Award recipients, if you're still in the room, please stand up so we can acknowledge you one more time before the gala tomorrow night. To everyone who presented today, thank you, thank you, thank you. An amazing group. Woo! Wow, and Pat, do you want to tell them where we're going tonight?
I do, but I just want to say one of the best things about the case study day is how generous we all are in the industry to each other. It is a great blessing. Now, if you were here last year, you know where the Summit Mixer is. It's out those doors and towards the Frontier Tower, hosted light fare with a cash bar. In the Frontier Tower on the ground floor. See you all there.
Have a great evening and enjoy the gala tomorrow night.